How's it going, everyone? My name is True Wonder Dog, and I'm here today with a comprehensive guide for Ridley. Like many of you watching, this character's reveal got me very excited for this game. Not just because Ridley is a hefty boy, but because he's one of the main big bads of the Metroid series. Growing up as a kid, I was always more scared of this guy than I was Mother Brain. So with all that said, let's begin this guide by talking about Ridley's biggest strengths and weaknesses. Now, as far as the strengths goes, Ridley is a very mobile character despite being a very heavy character. So he's very tough for the opponent to kill, just like other heavy characters on the roster, but with the added benefit of very good mobility. He's able to fly, he's got pretty good ground movement too, all things considered, and he's fairly good at zoning, and his edge guarding is also fantastic. This guy has a very good edge game. Once he knocks the opponent away from the stage, they have a very tough time getting back in, and to top it all off, he can kill the opponent even if their percentage isn't that high. Now with all that said, Ridley certainly isn't without his flaws. He definitely has some weaknesses to be sure. Since he is a big body character, his hurt box is also bigger, so he's very easy for the opponent to hit and also easier for the opponent to combo. And on top of that, he doesn't really have any good get off me tools. He's not very good at keeping the opponent away once they get in, which means you want to rely a lot more on his zoning and use his longer range attacks to keep the opponent at bay. And then on top of all that, some of his best moves are a bit risky and also very unsafe. He has a select few moves that are a bit safer and not quite as risky, but his big stuff that makes him really good requires a very solid read. If you throw it out willy-nilly, you're gonna get punished for it and likely end up losing. But thankfully, Ridley's strengths definitely outweigh his weaknesses in my opinion, especially his crazy edge guarding. So next up, let's have a look at all of Ridley's attacks. So first up, we have the forward tilt. Pretty solid range, as you can see here, very good for poking the opponent from a distance, and surprisingly fast too for a character this big. That's a pretty fast forward tilt. And on top of that, its damage is also scary, certainly nothing to sneeze at. And then his down pivot is almost just as good. It's not quite as fast and the range isn't quite as good either, but it does launch the opponent for some short follow-ups depending on your spacing. Good for starting off combos or at the very least launching the opponent into the air and forcing them to react. And then last but certainly not least, we have the up tilt. This attack is a pretty solid anti-air and it actually hits a little bit behind Ridley as well, as you can see here. So even if the opponent crosses you up, you can hit them if they're behind you or if they're above and behind you. It's honestly a pretty solid anti-air tool for when the opponent's trying to jump in from above. Just a solid defensive tool, also good for combos in certain situations too. And next let's talk about the dash attack. Now it's pretty darn fast and good horizontal range as well. A great tool for whiff punishing to be sure, or catching the opponent during their landing frames. It can be very good for that. You can also knock the opponent away from the stage with it, and then maybe start your ledge guarding. It could be good for that as well. And since it covers so much distance, it can also be good for pressuring the opponent after certain knockdowns. And then let's talk about the jab. This jab is fairly unique. The first hit has pretty good range, but the follow-ups have exceptionally good range. Very similar to Charizard, honestly. Great range on the first hit, then the follow-ups are very good. It's honestly a pretty solid jab string. And next up, let's talk about the smash attack. So first up, we have the forward smash. Not the best range on it, but a lot of damage honestly, and if you charge it, even more so, and it knocks the opponent so far away. It's great for killing the opponent if you do manage to land the hit, and even if you don't manage to kill the opponent with it, it's a great way to start off your edge game. And then we have the up smash. Pretty solid hitbox and faster than you think it would be. And just like the up tilt, it does hit a little bit behind Ridley. So even if the opponent does manage to cross you up, this attack can still catch them. So it's pretty dang good for that. Honestly, a pretty solid get off me tool, similar to the up smash, and you can also combo into it in certain situations, or catch the opponent on their way down if they're trying to get cheeky and attack you from above. A very solid defensive tool and also good for killing the opponent. And then last but not least, we have the down smash. Possibly my favorite of all the smashes since it hits on both sides and has an area of effect. It doesn't quite hit as far as the attack would imply, but it's got pretty dang good range on it. It's pretty fantastic for getting the opponent off you if they manage to dodge and cross you up. Bam, this catches both sides, and it can also be a good edge guard tool as well if the opponent's trying to come from below. They might try to hop up on stage, you can catch them with this and get the kill, and as you can see, it launches the opponent pretty darn high. And honestly, all of Ridley's smash attacks are great for killing the opponent. This might be the weakest one for doing that, but it certainly still can do it. It's got a solid hitbox and does a lot of damage. Its only downside is being a bit slow. And next up, let's talk about the air attacks. Ridley's air superiority might be the best thing about him on top of him being a heavy character, since most heavy characters can't fly around like this. And by the way, the flight is actually a very cleverly disguised triple jump, so you can jump once, jump again, and jump a third time. And then of course you have several options for moving from there, but those are your special attacks. The flight by itself is just the jump button. but you can do it up to 3 times, which gives you a lot of air mobility and also great air recovery when knocked off the stage. So now let's start off with his neutral air. So his neutral air attack is a pretty good get off me tool. As you can see, that hitbox is pretty big, hits all the way around Ridley. This can be a good scramble situation. Once again, as mentioned earlier, Ridley's not the best at getting people off of him, but if the opponent's trying to close the distance on you and you're not quite sure what to do, this can be a fantastic choice. Just attack in the air, get the opponent off you. Neutral air can be fantastic for that. It's good for trying to stop them before they get in, because once they do, it's going to be a bit tough for you. So use this move to keep them away when they're a little bit too close. And then we have the forward air, one of my favorite air attacks just because the animation and it hits several times. This can be a pretty good tool for comboing after his down throw. It's honestly quite easy to do and leads to some free damage. It's certainly not the scariest air attack in terms of kill factor, but it is quite fast and some free damage. Now if you do want a scary air attack, that's the back air. This is definitely one of Ridley's most frightening air attacks. It does pretty dang good damage and it's surprisingly fast and the range ain't too shabby either. This is the kind of move that scares your opponent from jumping in the air with you. This is the kind of move that wants them to stay on the ground. It has a pretty high likelihood of killing the opponent and does a very good amount of damage too. It might not be as fast as the forward air or the neutral air, but it more than makes up for that speed and damage. The opponent basically never wants to be behind Ridley when he's jumping. And next we have his up air. This attack can be good if the opponent's trying to jump above you, or if you've already launched them pretty high up and you want to use this move to seal the deal. It actually does have a pretty good chance of killing the opponent, so it's good for that. It does only hit above Ridley, not very much of a horizontal hitbox, so just keep that in mind. You do want to work a little bit to line up the shot before going for it, though even so, it's still great for killing the opponent. And then last but certainly not least, we have the down air. This hits directly below Ridley, nothing really fancy about it. Pretty darn good move though if the opponent's right below you. It can spike the opponent, but just keep in mind, similar to Simon Belmont, you've fully committed this attack once you've done it, which means if you do want to use this move to spike the opponent, make sure you have at least one more stock than they do, since you're both very likely to die. And that's it for the smash attack, so next let's talk about the specials. I actually love a lot of these, they're pretty dang cool with their animations, and they're also quite versatile too. So first up we have the forward B. This attack is easily one of my favorite in the game. It carries the opponent all the way across the stage and then throws them off to start your ledge game, which is again one of the best things about Ridley, so it's a fantastic way to get the opponent on the defensive, so this move is great for starting off your edge game. Now with that in mind, it is quite slow on startup, so be careful when using it, and while it is unblockable, it does beat the opponent's shield, the opponent can also mash out of it, which means unless you're close to the edge already, you might not always get to the stage before you toss them off, so just keep that in mind. They can break out of it a bit early. However, one important thing to note is that Ridley can actually jump cancel this move before reaching the edge, which can allow you to be in the air and then start your edge game a bit sooner. And next up we have the neutral B, which by itself isn't very intimidating, it's just a simple fireball. However, what makes this move especially effective is you can charge it down to do multiple fireballs. You can throw just a few, or charge it down all the way, and then get several, and this is honestly what makes his edge guarding so dang good. You knock the opponent away, and now the opponent has to work very hard to avoid these, and you can counter appropriately. And next let's talk about his up B. This move is honestly pretty interesting. So by default you just go straight up. However, similar to Firefox, once the animation starts charging, you can now dictate which direction you go. So by default, you go straight up. However, if during the animation you hold forward, that's what happens. And notice the move was slightly angled downward, so in the air it's not exactly sideways, it's a bit forward and down, which makes this move great for whiff punishing the opponent in the air. Especially if they're far from the stage, this move can actually ring them out. Now if you hold back during the animation, then you get this. Instead of going forward and down, it goes backwards and up, which makes it good for hitting opponents who jump over you and then behind you. And then finally, if you hold down during the animation, you get a dive kick. It does pretty good damage, it can actually be good for spiking the opponent as well. It's certainly a risky option, but honestly most attacks from up B are pretty risky. I don't find myself using them most of the time, nor do I see them used much at high level, but they are good for very specific situations such as ringing the opponent out. And then last but not least we have the down special. This is a very gimmicky move, but it gets you a little bit excited at the possibilities of it. So if landed at max range, it does a crazy high amount of damage to the opponent and leaves them on the ground for a little bit longer as well. Although I'm not sure if any of the follow-ups are truly guaranteed. You can get some hits afterward depending on how your opponent responds, but the game doesn't seem to treat it as a true combo. so I'm actually not sure if these are guaranteed or not. I imagine that a single follow-up is, but the game doesn't seem to treat it as a true combo, so I can't be certain. But even so, this move still does massive damage, and it's not that tough to space. You just gotta make sure you're not too close when you do it, because then the damage is pretty much nothing. It's a joke unless you're a little bit outside that tickle range. I wouldn't say it requires perfect spacing so much as it requires you to be outside a certain range. And then last but not least, let's talk about the throws. So first up we have the down throw, which as mentioned earlier combos very easily into your forward air. And then you have the forward throw and back throw, which honestly aren't anything special, but they are good for getting the opponent off you, which is good because once again Ridley is more of a zoner, not so much a rushdown character, so some extra space is always pretty darn good. Now the back throw does have a higher chance of killing the opponent than the forward throw, so do make sure to keep that in mind. And then last but not least we have the forward throw. This can be good for setting up your follow-ups, though it doesn't seem to actually combo, at least not at lower percentages. But it's still good for throwing your opponent into the sky and forcing them to deal with your pressure from below. And alright everyone, that concludes this guide for Ridley. Thanks so much for watching and I hope you enjoyed. If you did, then please leave a like down below, it really does help my channel out a lot. And while you're down there, please comment which character you want a guide for next. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and ring the bell. That way you never miss a future video. Make sure to come back next time, and as always, stay underdogs.